day. Welcome to our BW Businessworld dialogue. Startups are disrupting the economy. Startups are building new enterprises. Startups are the new large players in every sector. To understand what's happening in the startup world, what's happening in the VC world, what's happening in the investing world, we have Mr. Mahendra Swarup, founder of VG Capital, today with us. Mr. Swarup, thank you for talking to Business World.
It's a pleasure always, Annurag.
And as 2026 is starting, what are the things that we are likely to carry forward in 2026? Will 2026 be a year of startups?
I think if you look at 2025 has been a great year for Indian startup ecosystem. Almost $10.5 billion have been invested in the startup. Right? Now, if you put $10.5 billion and see it through a period of 4 to 5 years when the exits start happening, this, if you take an average growth and the multiples which the investors achieve, this $10.5 billion is going to become almost about $40–45 billion at the time of exit. So you can imagine that the amount of money which will be added to the GDP because of the startup ecosystem which is maturing. I would say that 2025 has been an year where the ecosystem has proven that it has matured.
And give us the parameters on which you interpret it as being mature.
I think as we have been chatting before we started this formal interaction, was that the investor is known by the exits, not by the investments he make, right? So I think that's absolutely correct. If you see the kind of exits which have been achieved in 2025, not only through the M&A route or the larger private equity or VC funds investing and buying over the earlier investors, but through the public market putting faith into Indian startup ecosystem. So that's where the credibility counts. When the real investor, right, who is the retail investor in this country, right, starts buying into the IPOs of startups, right, that is clearly shows that the ecosystem has matured. And the Indian investor, right, typically the Indian retail investor is a very shrewd investor. So he definitely sees a lot of potential, and a lot of people question that it's high valuations, none of them are making money, they are all loss making thing. The first time, I think, in the history of the investors in this country, that people have put faith into loss making companies. So the whole way you look at the future has changed. So that's the dramatic change which is happening in this country, which people don't realize, that the investor now doesn't invest in the past performance of an organization, right? They are investing behind the future corporations of this country, right? So that's a big change in the attitude of an Indian investor, right? He is willing to take risks, right? And he wants to make big money. He's not happy with the trading profits which people make, right? He's looking for big buck returns, and he is willing to wait for it.
And also the retail investor doesn't want to be left out of the party, because clearly there's a party for investors happening, at least in the right startups. Now, how do you identify a right startup? Have the rules for investing changed?
They definitely have changed over time, right? Even the early stage investors have become more mature. The earlier seed stage investors, like the angel investors, a lot of them have burned their hands at it. As you know that 90% of the startups fail. It's only the 10% which give you these returns, which is, so to identify those 10% is not easy. One of the issues which we have, or which is a significant part of the whole ecosystem, is the domestic venture capital. Fortunately or unfortunately, I would call it, the domestic VC ecosystem has not developed, right? Because they haven't had the advantage of going through the full life cycle of an investment. many of these VCs are in the investment stage still, right? All the earlier investments which were made by VCs were all foreign investors, right? Be it from the US, from Silicon Valley or Europe or Japan or elsewhere.
South Africa.
South Africa. And the Indian VC system is yet to learn, fully develop, because they haven't had some
learning
curves, and the exits haven't started happening, right? If you see most of the IPOs which have happened, it's the early Chinese investors who have made money, the exits, or the American investors. You would hardly see any of these.
Sorry, I'm stopping you. Maybe 2 years back, you and me were talking about what is the difference between the philosophy of a Chinese investor and a Japanese investor and an American investor. We will come back to that also, but go on.
Yeah. So I think once the VC system, the domestic VC system evolves and matures, that's where the dynamism in the ecosystem will be very different from what it is today, right? So the Indian VCs who have yet to make money, right? So that money hasn't come back into the system. The acceleration happens when the Indian investor will start making money, right? Because they are the people who will put back the money into this, and that's where the real innovation will happen. They will have the appetite and the risk appetite to fund innovative startups. Today they're slightly conservative, right? Most of them are chasing the Indian consumer story, because everyone believes 1.4 billion Indians, right? It's a good story to be investing behind, but my belief is that the risk-taking ability of the Indian VC is still very limited. And we have the ability, if you look at the talent pool which India has, right? The new generation which is coming in, which is doesn't want to work, wants to do something on their own, right? We still have to learn to imagine big, right? I think it's not a question of vision, it's a question of imagining, right? Startup system is all about your imagination, how big it is, right? You need to imagine things, and we have to very quickly start learning imagining for the world and stop imagining only for the 1.4 billion Indians.
Right? Now, you're right, and let me ask you, if you were an investor, which you are, as we head into 2026, as an investor, how are you looking at various sectors? What are the sectors that you are particularly bullish about, and why?
See, what I was bullish about, say in 2025 or before that, right? 2026, we are all venturing into a very uncertain world, right? If you say that what succeeded in 2023, 2024, 2025 may not be the story for 2026. The disruptions which is happening in tech, the disruptions which are happening in the consumer behavior, with the new generation coming, their ability to spend increasing, there has been a cultural change, right? Not only happening in India, but across the world. And it's more dramatic in India. Right? So what was true in the past will not hold at all, in my view, for 2026 and beyond. So the 2026 risk profile will be very different from what we had in the earlier years. Right? Essentially because of the three factors which I said is the disruption, which everyone calls AI, which is there, and people believe it's a bubble, but I don't think it's a bubble.
Right? Why is that?
Anything which gets valued beyond the comprehension of a common man becomes a bubble, right?
Because they can't understand.
They don't understand, or they can't understand, or they don't want to understand, right? And that's what makes billionaires, people who are able to see the future and continue to invest behind such a future. So I think that leads to dramatic creation of wealth.
So there is this deluge of investing into companies that are embracing AI companies in the AI ecosystem, you know. What do you, and their valuations, I mean, if there is a medtech company that is using AI deeply, is now a medtech AI company, and suddenly the valuation is much higher, let me say that. What do you have to say that? I keep joking.
There are a couple of things I think which are responsible for these high valuations of .ai, right? One of the reasons is that it will bring down the costs dramatically, right? In terms of delivery of health tech, delivery of ed tech, delivery of ad tech, right? Fintech, anything you talk about, the life cycle of the product to the market would reduce dramatically. And you will fail much faster than earlier, right? So the speed of failure determines the future, right? So the more you fail, the more successful few companies would be.
So it's like what we used to say, fail fast, fail early.
Right. So AI will actually accelerate the failures rather than help the successes.
Now if there was somebody who was starting a company in 2026, what would be your advice to a founder who's starting a company in 2026? Doesn't matter what age profile.
I think if you're starting something in 2026, firstly is that you cannot start anything, even developing a beauty product or whatever it is. You will not be able to do it till you understand tech, right? So tech will be the dominant factor in your determining what you want to really pursue. If you do not understand tech, right, I don't think so that you'll succeed. That is number one, right? Tech is going to influence everyone. So whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you are a consumer, whether you're a student, you're a housewife, you're a housemaker, whatever you may be, right? Tech will have disproportionate impact on your daily routines and the way you behave, the way you spend, right? So any startup founder needs to understand the impact of the disruptive technologies which are coming, and how is going to impact the behavior and change the market. Right? And no one can really envisage how it is going to be. So going into 2026, I would guess that it will be only the brave who will try something.
So you got to be brave and be a little audacious to be able to start something in 2026. Now let me ask you a question about sectors. You know, deep tech is really the flavor of the investors, you know, AI is, and even in CPG, you're seeing many new companies in very crowded segments. They're differentiated. So give us a sense of which are the sectors.
I think let me come to that the definition of sectors is going to dramatically change as we move forward. I would guess that there will be fusion of sectors, right? The reason is that the technology is so equitably getting distributed across various strata, right? And when you talked about sectors, they were related to the socio-economic segmentation in any society, right? That is losing its significance. Society is becoming more and more equitable, and it's essentially because of social media and so many other factors which are playing, right?
Sure.
So the traditional sectors which we know about, which you mentioned, deep tech is one thing, right? Within deep tech, right, there's a deep tech, there is deep, right, deeper tech, and right. So you keep going into it, and there's no end to how deep the tech is, right? Because it's disrupting and evolving so fast, right, that it's beyond the comprehension of many of us. Many people who are investing behind AI really don't understand what AI is. As it evolves, they keep understanding, right? So it's an evolutionary process. So neither do I know what AI is, neither would I think you would know what AI is, sure, right? It's evolving every day, right? Every dollar which goes into AI, right, transforms itself into something new, right? Which people are unable to predict. It's just is happening because it's not human effort which is growing AI. It's the machines which are growing AI, right? So their ability to actually grow, right, which humans cannot comprehend, right, can only be at the end of what it has done. So how the machine will be trained and how the machine is going to be behaving, right, is beyond even the best of investors.
Sure.
So as when you play cards or when you go to a casino,
You're saying investing is like being in a casino?
Yes, I think 2026 and beyond it's going to be like that. Right? So you have to put your chips on the right numbers.
Well, you don't know what the right numbers are.
Yeah, and then the ruler will decide what was the right number.
So you're saying
right?
there is a huge, you got to take big bets.
Yes.
And one of them would work out.
Right. It would work out because I would guess that, as I said, Anurag, in the beginning, is that what has been your criteria and your basis of investing in the past 4-5 years is no longer going to be valid in 2026. Things are getting disrupted so fast, geopolitical situation, right? The way the incomes are being generated, the way they are being spent, the new generation's point of view on things, right? So it's actually very difficult to say that your past will make you succeed in the future. No way.
That's true for almost everything. What got you here won't get you there. Yes. But let me ask you, I've always believed that the investors are even bigger dreamers than the entrepreneur. What do you have to say to that?
I think the investor is a bigger, not a dreamer, he imagines how the world would be, right? And dreaming is something which you, right, so I think the sign of a good investor is that he invests behind his own imagination rather than the founder's imagination.
So he supplements.
It's his yeah, right. So if he says that there is that the imagination is synchronized, then he invests. And that comes from experience. If you look at some of the tech investors in Silicon Valley, right, they have been doing it for almost a generation now, right? And their ability to think and imagine the future is much more than what we are in India. Because we are still very, very much involved with solving our day-to-day problems and issues. We are still talking about beauty products, right, things like that, or consumer led startups. In the US, that's not the fad, so could say. Consumer led is there. I'm not saying that they're not a set of VCs who do not invest behind that, right? But that part of, or that segment has matured so much, right, for you to really invest behind it, that there'll be any innovation in that is very limited.
Sure. Now let me, I alluded to the fact that you and me discussed 2 or 3 years back, the approach of American investors versus Japanese investors versus Chinese investors. Is there a difference in their thinking?
I think there is a difference in their thinking, right? But the way they look at money and investments is the same, right? I think one of the things which has happened in the last about a decade is that every investor globally thinks alike in terms of the returns which they are expecting. The Chinese investor is the only investor who really understands scale. The US investor does not understand scale, they understand innovation and technology. They get their returns by betting behind innovations, right? Whereas the Chinese investor invests behind achieving scale. Their returns come out of scale, right? The US investors' returns comes out of innovation and technology, right? So there's a dramatic difference, right? So both make money, right? The path to making money is the least resistance, with the least resistance is the US investor. Innovation happens very, very quickly, very, very fast, and returns are that much more quicker, and the risk is also that much higher, right? Whereas for us investor which is investing behind scale or the size of the market, so to say, like China and India, they're huge markets, right? The returns are smaller, but takes that much longer. And I would guess the risk in countries like India and China is much, much more, because you are playing over a longer horizon, In India, you should not expect a return if you're looking really at big returns before 7 to 8 or 10 years, right? Whereas in a Silicon Valley investor can get a very quick return in 3 to 4 or 5 years.
If you're an angel investor, what is your advice to angel investors in 2026? Because a lot of people tasted success in the last 5 years, 6 years, and spurred by their success, more and more people want to turn into angel investors. But are there perils of being an angel investor? What's your advice to an angel investor in 2026?
One is that if you are an angel investor, sit back and see where the world is going. Don't risk your money at this stage, right? I think it'll be more safer and slightly you will be able to mitigate your risks. If you want to dabble and look for higher returns, don't do it yourself. Invest behind either a network which you create of your own, right, if you have the ability to do that, or go and invest behind good VC general partners.
Fantastic. Now, my last question to you. You operated companies, you started India's first digital media company, then you helped a digital agency, digital first agency to be acquired by the largest, and then you became a serial investor, then the fund. What has been your top 3 observations of the last decade?
I think one of the things is that I have seen how the mindset of the graduates or the IIT graduates or engineering graduates or any other graduate has changed over time towards entrepreneurship.
So they don't want to be in jobs, rather they want to be entrepreneurs immediately.
Right. So in the last 10 years, I remember a decade ago when I used to go and lecture some of these students in either in the IIMs or the MBAs or the IITs, I always used to say that the success of an IIT, right, should not be considered by what's the highest salary which was offered on the campus, right? But what collective wealth creation of your alumni should determine the success of the institution,
Sure.
Right? So still I think if you read the headlines in the newspapers that someone has got an offer of 1 crore out of the campus or something, right? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, right? But how much has the IMA graduates created wealth over the last 10 years? Should determine whether IM is worth your going or not going,
Sure.
Right? So I think the way entrepreneurship is looked at has changed.
So there are role models, successful role models in the Indian entrepreneurship ecosystem, which
Yes.
is creating more entrepreneurs.
More entrepreneurs, yes.
Right out of college.
Right.
Is what you're saying. One
Yes.
big trend.
Yeah. The second trend is that the policy makers have woken up to the power of the startups, right? That's a significant move, right? I remember the early days when we used to go and meet the government officials and the bureaucrats and the policy makers. They hardly knew what a venture capital fund is. I've been president and founder of Indian Venture Capital Association, and when we used to go and tell them that what a venture capital is, none of them understood, and startups they never knew. They only knew how to frame regulations for large corporates, right? Large businesses, industrial houses. What is a startup? They didn't know. What they knew about was Kirana stores and SMEs. Our break came to be surprising in the story that we went and saw one of the secretaries of the government of India, I won't name him, and we were talking about what private equities. I was giving them a presentation on what private equity and venture capital is. Then he says that now I know what you guys do because my son now works for Blackstone in New York. Right? So the first time he realized that there is something like a private equity and venture capital. Right? And I think when the government has a personal experience, someone who is a policy maker, right, things start changing.
Sure.
Right?
You're saying the government has become very progressive.
Extremely progressive.
Understanding and accelerating this movement.
If I would have to give credit to anyone for this, India being one of the largest startup ecosystem, is the government. Right? Neither the VCs nor the private equity. Is the government's 10 years of aggressive pursuit of developing this ecosystem, right? They have put almost, means SIDBI manages 10,000 crores of money, the SME fund which is 50,000 crores, right? So, it's almost 100,000 crores which is the government has actually put as seed capital in the VC ecosystem, right? So, that is what has actually changed the game. Now, if you look at SIDBI's 10,000 crores or the fund of funds which the government of India has made for the startups, you are expected to actually raise another 4 times of that money which you get. So, if a fund gets 10 crores, he has to raise another 40 crores, right, to be drawing that 10 crores. So, the kind of impact it had on getting domestic capital into the VC ecosystem and the startup ecosystem has been dramatic, right. And I think credit goes all to this government to have thought in this way, right, to actually start seeding. And the way to seed the startup ecosystem is to give seed capital to the venture capital funds in India, right. There are a lot of things yet to be done. I think the government has to liberalize how the banks would take risk and put money into venture capital funds. It's the insurance sector which can put huge amount of money. There's so much of money locked up in public provident fund schemes, right. If that money is released for venture capital and private equity, then you will see the massive growth of entrepreneurship and innovation in this country.
And the third, so one is the attitude of young, bright minds towards entrepreneurship. They want to be entrepreneurs when they graduate rather than working for someone. Second is the enabling role of the government in providing seed capital to funds to be able to invest ahead. And the
third one, which I had already mentioned to you earlier, is the maturing of the Indian investor, right, the retail investor, right, who now sees, as I said, they don't go by the past performance. No one looks at your last year's or last 3 years balance sheets and profit and loss accounts, right. What they see today is what the future is, right. So, the dramatic change in the attitude of the retail investor, right, is what is going to dramatically change how the exits happen, right.
Thank you, Mr. Swarup. You've taken us through what we should expect in 2026. Now, as an investor yourself, as somebody who's invested in companies, you have a very good portfolio in VG Capital. Give us a sense of some of the companies that you've invested in and how is the road ahead for some of them?
I think I'm increasingly spending my time with my portfolio companies in terms of that, how can they be shock proof for the future, right. If you look at the vintage of our fund, we started investing almost 4 years ago, right, and harvesting time is now. Now, the challenge is that will the investor, right, be able to relate to the investments which have been made in the last 5 years? That's the challenge, right. Would they believe in those companies?
You invested in advertising technology.
Yeah, we've invested in a lot of
tech, consumer tech.
Yeah. So, I think we are making them actually investor worthy in terms of their pivoting and adopting newer technologies, so called .ai, right, to enable them face the future, right. So, I think 2026 for many of the VCs like us, right, would be spent in not looking at new opportunities, but trying to make our own investments of the last 4-5 years into the next stage, so that they will be leap with, they can take a leap. The investor comes in, right,
things of that sort.
So we are putting a layer of new technologies or deep tech on all our portfolio companies.
Thank you, Mr. Swarup, for talking to BW Disrupt and BW Businessworld. I'm sure in 2026, VG Capital and its portfolio will see growth. The Indian startup investing ecosystem will mature. We'll have even more money coming from Indian investors and from foreign investors, and hopefully there'll be many more exits and IPOs. So, on that happy note, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you very much, Anurag. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much.